Hey everyone, Chris here. During the 2023 Xbox Games Showcase, after over 6 years in development, Atlus finally debuted footage of their new game, Metaphor: ReFantazio. As a big fan of the Persona series, I'm really excited for what's next from Studio Zero. So much so, I started working on a shot-by-shot analysis of the announcement trailer. However, about halfway through editing, Atlus held a live stream on June 20th that contained even more details about the game, including interviews from the developers. These interviews contained even more information, including some additional footage not seen in the trailer. Because of this, I've decided to do something a bit different. In this video, I'll briefly go over a general synopsis of the game as can best be understood, and then I'm going to cover more than a dozen small details that I noticed that I haven't seen others mentioning in their respective breakdown videos. So let's get started. In 2016, shortly after the release of Persona 5, the core development team of that game, who had also worked on Personas 3 and 4 as well as Catherine, led by game director Katsura Hashino, decided to create a new group within Sega Atlus. They called it Studio Zero. He brought about 20 people with him to create this group, including the lead character designer for the Persona series and the lead composer as well. You see, up until then, all of the Shin Megami Tensei series games, including the Persona series games which were a spin-off, all took place in contemporary times, modern times, in our world basically, or a post-apocalyptic world similar to ours. This was the style of the Atlus RPG. They wanted to differentiate themselves from the traditional fantasy RPGs that most game development companies were making at the time. But after decades of doing that, Hashino thought, let's try going back and making our version of a fantasy game, a fantasy RPG, but with our style and game mechanics. He envisions Metaphor as potentially being a third pillar at the Atlus game series, along with Shin Megami Tensei and Persona. It'll be set in a high fantasy world, but at the same time have allusions to our contemporary world woven within the story. And that was the basis that began as Project ReFantazio and ultimately became Metaphor. Now keep in mind, everything I'm about to say here is speculative, but judging by what I've seen in the trailer, the world of Metaphor takes place in a high fantasy setting filled with all different types of races. And the main crux of the story is that the prince of the nation was put under a curse many years ago, and just recently the king had been killed. This leaves the populace without any kind of monarchy to rule. So, the society decides to hold an election. The protagonist of the story is going to be one of those people who's striving to become the next ruler, and along the way he'll gather followers to support him. Another major part of the story revolves around a novel that the protagonist carries with him. This novel tells a fantasy story, or at least a fantasy to them, about a world filled with glass towers where everyone lives together as one tribe. Basically, they're describing our world. It's a fantasy to them, but it's a world they're striving to create. In the trailer, someone says, "It all began with the novel in thy possession." I'm not entirely sure how the combat plays into this, but part of the game also includes you and your party members having the power to call forth archetypes, or in other words, the ability to take on the classic RPG fantasy forms, like warriors, knights, and thieves. So that's a basic overview of what the game will be about. If you want a deeper dive about how the game will work and what mechanics it borrows from the Shin Megami Tensei and Persona series, check out one of the other great breakdown videos available on YouTube. Now, let's talk about some of those small details I was referring to at the beginning, things that I noticed that I haven't seen anyone else mention. Let's start with the protagonist, the heterochromia-eyed, blue-haired young man. In the story, he's simply referred to as Traveling Boy, and it's not clear if unlike Persona games you can name the protagonist or not. His starting archetype appears to be Seeker. As for his race, he may be human, although I'm not entirely sure. There's this line from the trailer where someone cries out, "Is that a human?" As if it's a surprise, a human being something unusual. At another point in the trailer, someone shouts, "The truth of the humans is laid bare." Are they referring to the protagonist's race? Or are they referring to the humans from the novel he carries? Now let's talk about your party members. Now I believe everyone in this shot is going to be a party member. Let's go over each one. First up is the tiny fairy Gallica. Much like Morgana in Persona 5, Gallica is your constant companion. She can be seen almost always beside the protagonist in the trailer. When exploring dungeons, she takes on the role of navigator, much like the characters of Futaba, Fuka, and Rise in prior Persona games. Next we have the red-headed, long-eared elf, Hulkenberg. Her design has existed as far back as Project ReFantazio, when the game was originally intended to be more of a medieval fantasy. Yet even then she was depicted often as a knight, something that's been carried over into one of her archetypes. And in the trailer, I believe it's her voice that says, "I pledged my life to the prince, and I'll not lose it to you." In the background of the live stream, her name was simply shown as being Red-Haired Knight, probably before you knew her name, and she's shouting, "That's no sandworm. A horror like that, something something something." A couple more of Hulkenberg's race appear in the trailer. We can see one standing among this lineup of the various races, as well as this child elf in the background. The next party member is this blonde-haired horned man named Strahl. Throughout the trailer, he's shown wielding the warrior, trickster, and fighter archetypes. There's also this shot from the June 20th livestream showing a developer equipping Strahl's various archetypes. And we can see him fighting a boss battle where he screams, "Damn it, we can't die here!" Two more members of Strahl's race appear in this shot, as well as this nobleman speaking to a crowd. I think these four characters will make up your initial party. Next up is this bat/bunny character named Heismei. Heismei is seen wielding the power of the ninja and thief archetypes. And this is what Heismei and the other party members look like on the party selection screen. There's also this three-eyed girl named Yufa. She'll also be a follower whom you form a bond with. Her name appears in the bottom left. We can also see her in this shot brandishing what looks like a magical staff. I couldn't find names for the last two party members. The first is this blonde, large foreheaded girl who's wearing a red dress inspired by 60s fashion. Character designer Soejima said that this was deliberate so as to tie it back to our world. This character can also briefly be seen in this shot of the party. The last party member I can identify is this beast man in a suit. He appears several times throughout the trailer. In this cutscene, we can see him distraught as he cradles a pink-haired beast girl in his arms, as revealed by her cute dog-like ears atop her head. We can also see the ears of another beast person in the background of this shot. There's also this rough-and-tumble beast girl that you form a bond with. I've discovered that her name is actually Catherine, which is pretty funny knowing the Catherine games, and I'll explain how I know that in just a moment. Another person from the trailer who you're shown making a bond with is with this tall person in a hat that you meet in a tavern that has a logo with a crescent moon. During the live stream, it was revealed that this character in blue on the right's name is actually the ancient fairy Goldia. What they're saying here, according to Google Translate, is a curse that even the greatest saint, and saint in quotation marks, in the kingdom could not cleanse, no matter what we do. The livestream showed a better view of the world map, and as we zoom in, we meet Nuras, the pilot and owner of a Gauntlet runner, a land ship that you use to travel about the world. If you freeze it just right, you can make out his distinctive white hair and sideburns in the cockpit. The last character in the trailer whose name I can discover is this young girl, whose name is Marie. She's one of the people you form a bond with. Unlike the other followers whom you shake their hands, with Marie, you perform a pinky swear. The text on the screen reads, "I hear voices from somewhere." Oh, and you can see Gallica sitting on the left there. There are actually a lot of shots of Marie's social link in the background of the live stream. Here she's saying, "Papa always says not to go into his something. I'm good at working." The traveling boy asks, "Do you help out every day?" And then she says, "Yes, I'll work hard. Then sometimes," and then there's some text I can't read, and she finishes with, "I'll do a really good job." Another character featured prominently in the trailer is this old man, who I think is talking about the election. You can see that he may also be this person standing among the line of different races. He has pale skin and distinctive markings on his forehead. He also has elf-like ears, though not quite as long as Hulkenberg's, so maybe he's a different race. And the last character in the trailer that I can identify is this rather angry-looking woman. She too has pale skin and ornate features on her forehead, so maybe she's of the same race as the old man. If you paid close attention to the backgrounds during the livestream, it was revealed that you could obtain archetypes through your bonds. You can see here on level 1 of Marie's social link, after you perform the Pinky Swear, you can get a new ability, and that ability is the Healer archetype. The text reads, "The party can now study the Healer." Likewise, when you form a bond with Catherine, you receive the Brawler archetype. This is also where I found out that her name is Catherine. It's a little hard to read, but you can just barely make it out. Like in the Persona games, you get to choose what the protagonist says during social links. As I showed a moment ago, during Marie's social link, one of the questions you can ask is, "Do you help out every day?" But instead of going directly to Marie's answer like you would in a Persona game, we see the protagonist's character portrait. This seems to suggest that the character will actually have speaking lines in this game. We see another example here where Gallica is asking about dragons. The protagonist responds, and then we see what I think is the protagonist's response appear. We also see the familiar squiggly lines of frustration appear above Gallica's head. We see a few enemy names throughout the trailer and one on the website. Here, Heisme is targeting a Homo Tenta, a little tooth-like creature. We also see this creature at the end of the trailer. Is this the Metaphor mascot? We also see this spiky butterfly, and this thing that looks like a combination of a flower and a spider. I think this thing may be called a fiend flower, because in the results screen we can see that we picked up a fiend flower petal. In the background of the live stream, we can make out these skeleton warriors, although I can't really make out what their names say. It just starts with the word sword. There's this badass dragon boss fight, and as you can see by the current mission objective, its name is Mona. In another dragon boss battle, we see that this one's simply called Poison Dragon. And lastly, there's this grotesque looking thing from the trailer. The image on the website gives its name away though. It's the Great Worm Homobutera. One of the places the protagonist will visit during the game is an otherworldly-like room called Akademeia. Here, you will learn and inherit skills for your various archetypes. There's this pale man that sits behind a desk with a Bengal-looking cat. We see this same person in another cutscene where the protagonist wakes up in a dark void. The man is simply referred to as Unfamiliar Man, and he says, "This is the utopia our countrymen should aim for. You agree, yes?" He's possibly referring to the novel that the traveling boy carries with him. Maybe he had shown him a vision. We can also hear the voice of this character speaking in the trailer, and he says, "You truly are an intriguing one." He also says earlier, "You've acquired a most interesting power," most likely referring to the power of the archetypes. The room itself is laid out with bookcases all over the place. On the upper levels, you can clearly see there are sections dedicated to each archetype. So it seems this room serves the same function as the Velvet Room does in the Persona games, but the similarities don't end there. I can't help but notice the amount of purple all over the place. There's even this purple teacup and a book that looks like it has the Velvet Room's logo on it. Is this all coincidence? Or just a fun Easter egg? Or is it hinting that this room has more in common with the Velvet Room than we know? I kinda doubt it, but we'll just have to wait and see. Another item we see in the Akademeia room is this globe. Now I don't know about you, but that looks a heck of a lot like the North American continent to me. Maybe this novel that the protagonist is carrying isn't just a story. Maybe we're looking at an actual parallel world here. After all, the website's tagline does say, "Enter the mirror of reality." Here's a few more details I noticed about our fairy companion, Gallica. Like I said earlier, Gallica is always with you as you explore the world of Metaphor. And if you look very closely at this shot, you'll see there's opportunities to interact with her. By pressing Y, you can probably have a conversation. And unlike navigators in the Persona games, Gallica will actually follow you around as you explore dungeons. She'll even be there with you while you're in battle, although I doubt she'll actually fight. Regardless, she dresses for the occasion. You can see here that she wears leather leggings and arm coverings, and even has a tiny metal sword. This is a quick one, but I noticed a couple of people mentioning that this is the social stat screen, and while it probably serves the same function, these are actually your royal virtues. You can see that name mentioned at the bottom of this screen. And it makes sense, because the goal of the game is for you to become king. The graph itself is even in the shape of a crown. Here the protagonist's courage just leveled up, and you hear a mysterious voice say, "If thou aspire to true sovereignty, kindle the flame of thy courage and ignite the hearts of thy people." This is the battle results screen. You can see here, along with fiend flower petals, we also received some bewitching honey juice. And in this shot, we can make out that after the results screen, we can see the level up screen. And some battles can end with what's called a damage kill. This results in additional experience and money being granted to the party. While I don't think you'll actually fly in them, there are hints to airships being in this game. For example, in this sequence from the trailer, you can see we are riding atop what's called Skyrunner Charadruus. It appears to be an airship in the sky. And from this shot from the live stream, we can see the shadow of what appears to be an airship flying overhead. But judging by the trailer, it looks like we'll use Gauntlet runners to move around the map. Here you can see the main Gauntlet runner owned by Neurus in the center of the map. But I also noticed down in the lower left of the map, the icon for what I think is another Gauntlet runner. I'll finish this video with a couple of very minor background details. In the shot here with Catherine when you're making her social link, you can see a treasure chest glowing in the background. You can also see some people knocked out on the floor. Makes me wonder if this area is part of a dungeon. In the same vein, when you're making your bond with Yufa, you can see skulls and rib cages strewn all over the ground. And finally, in almost every area in this world, we see these white triangular sparkles floating in the air. They're in virtually every shot of the trailer. They even take the time to animate these in the anime cutscenes. If I had to guess, it's just an emanation of the natural magic of this world. And that concludes this video about the details you might have missed in the Metaphor ReFantazio debut. If you have any comments you'd like to add or any details you think I missed, be sure to leave a comment down below. Thanks for watching.